Yeah, Lieutenant General Igor Kirillov was famous for exposing the US-backed biolabs in Ukraine, the biolabs that were funded by the US in Ukraine. And he was the commander of the Russian radiological, chemical, and biological defense forces. And he was killed early yesterday morning alongside his aide in an explosion which Kiev has claimed responsibility for. Moscow has promised an adequate response, and this clearly presents an escalation of some sort, as Russia may target Ukrainian officials at the highest level for revenge and assassination, or even military annihilation. Yes, compliments of the season, and it's great to be with you again on Amogato Radio Communications, anchoring your program of value, your program of impact, trendy issues in the geopolitical economy. I still remain Abiodun Abari, and thanks for clicking in. Yes, Igor Kirillov has been in charge since 2017 of the military department, which protects troops from biological and chemical warfare, as well as the radioactive effects of an atomic or nuclear strike, or any dirty bombs for that matter. And during the Syria chemical attack debacle, Kirillov had said that the Syrian authorities had demanded several times that the Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons, that's OPCW, deploy specialists on the ground, but the demands were refused, citing inadequate security. Recall during Obama's time that he talked about the red lines being crossed, that the Bashar al-Assad regime then was using chemical weapons against the rebels. Actually, there were insinuations that it was just a red flag, and especially when Obama did not implement any action against the regime, even though he consistently asserted that the regime was using chemical weapons against the rebels. So, and you in the case of Andrei Skripal, a Russian intelligence defector, the West claimed that Novichok, a toxic chemical supposedly developed by the Soviet military, had been used. And after he and his daughter took ill in Salisbury, in the United Kingdom, Kirillov then stated that Western nations have their own chemical weapons program and the necessary expertise to synthesize highly lethal compounds in its deflection of the Russian origin of Novichok. He has always been at the forefront of defending Russia and exposing the hypocrisy of the West when it comes to biological and chemical warfare. And he added that Avil Mirzanayanov, a scientist, actually was the first person to discuss the Novichok program publicly after moving to the United States. And he found that irresponsible and insensitive, because to him that shows lack of proper discretion, because the risk of and the threats of proliferation was greatly raised by Vil Mirozayanov going public about the formula behind the Novichok. Okay, and of course his submissions regarding the network of US-funded biolabs are well documented extensively. When Russia invaded Ukraine in 2022, and there were reports that the biolabs were found out, and Kirillov was at the forefront of exposing those activities. Although Washington, however, claimed that the activities by the Defense Threat Reduction Agency, funded by the U.S. Pentagon, were just supposed to detect and identify naturally emerging threats. Okay, because Kirillov had claimed that the U.S. Evacuated about 16,000 samples from Ukraine at the start of the war in 2022, and also destroyed other pieces of evidence which could indicate sinister intentions, but that the Russian military was able to take hold of some materials that gave insight into this stealth program. All right, so and around October this year, the United Kingdom placed sanctions on Kirillov alongside the entire members of the military department under his command, stating that he was responsible for deploying chemical weapons in the Ukraine war. He claimed that Moscow has consistently denied, insisting that the materials were destroyed in 2017. And some hours before his assassination, the Ukrainian Security Service, the SBU, brought formal charges against Kirillov. And with this elimination, Kiev claims it was an operation against a war criminal. Okay, well, it's meant to be seen whether two wrongs actually do make a right, because he's been taken out. His assassination is against the tenets of international warfare. Okay, and it might just be termed as being criminal. All right. However, Russian Foreign Ministry spokesperson Maria Zakharova eulogized Kirillov as spending years exposing the crimes of the Anglo-Americans, working without fear, not hiding behind anyone's back, walking with his visor up for the motherland and for the truth. And Russian officials are calling Kirillov's assassination an act of terror, with Dmitry Medvedev, Russia's former president, former prime minister, and current deputy chair of the Russian Security Council, stating that the Kiev regime will pay dearly for his death, and that everything must be done to destroy those who ordered the murder of General Kirillov. That is talking about the political and military leadership of Ukraine. However, Russian authorities have detained an Uzbekistan citizen born in 1995 in relation to the killing of 54-year-old Kirillov and his assistant Ilya Polikarpov. And reports have it that the suspect was recruited by Ukrainian intelligence, and he traveled to Moscow, where he placed a homemade explosive device on an electric scooter parked near the late Kirillov's residence. He hired a car with surveillance equipment to monitor the area, transmitting live footage to his sponsors in Ukraine. And the explosive device was remotely activated once the footage of Kirillov exiting the building was relayed. So the reports also indicate that the suspect was promised $100,000 and relocation to a European nation after the success of the mission. Washington, however, has distanced itself from the whole scenario that unfolded yesterday. Washington denied having anything to do with the attack or having any prior knowledge. So, but Pentagon Press Secretary Major General Pat Ryder stated that, and I quote, I can tell you we were not aware of this operation in advance. We did not support or enable those kinds of activities, end of quote. We referred reporters to Ukraine for further information about the attack. But I doubt if Russia and his allies will believe that the U.S. did not have any prior information about this attack. And recall that the U.S. and his allies have been at the receiving end of Kirillov's diatribes, Kirillov's submissions, always trying to expose the hypocrisy of the West when it comes to biological and chemical weapons. Other dirty bombs, as it were. And General Ryder's words were echoed by the spokesperson of the United States State Department, Matthew Miller, who said, and I quote, I can tell you that the United States was not aware of it in advance and was not involved. But also adding that Kirillov was a general involved in a lot of atrocities So, with that statement, with that, is he implying that Kirillov was a legitimate target? I mean, for him to be saying that Kirillov was involved in a lot of atrocities, is he now presenting the justification for his being taken out, for his assassination? All right, even if it's against the rules of international engagements. And Dmitry Medvedev has also labeled the attack as a sign of Kiev's desperation and a clear indication of the agony of the Ukrainian government, which has resorted to using, and I quote, its remaining strength to justify its worthless existence to Western masters, prolong war and death, and explain away the catastrophic situation on the front line. End of quote. So, what could be the strategic intention of Kiev with this move? I mean, which could be termed as criminal of some sort. I mean, what does Kiev hope to gain strategically from taking out this general who's not actually at the war front, who is very far from the war front, who is in Moscow and is not involved in combat operations? So, objectively, Russia could be said to have been measured in their approach so far in this conflict. This, which Russia termed, President Putin termed a special military operation, which has specific objectives, limited but significant. And Russia has not actually brought to bear the extent of its military capabilities in their engagement with the Ukrainian military. And I know Russia has the capability of destroying Ukraine in its totality, even without the use of nuclear armaments. I mean, talking of complete annihilation of Ukraine, the complete takeover of Ukraine, but you'll be having hundreds of thousands of casualties if Russia engages unimaginable firepower. Okay, but Russia actually opted for a measured approach. Okay, the special military operation designed to achieve limited but significant political and military goals of demilitarization, denazification, and of course perpetual neutrality for Ukraine. That Ukraine must be neutral, Ukraine must not take sides, Ukraine must not join NATO. Okay, that Ukraine joining NATO would be a threat existential existential to Russia, and Russia will not just sit idly by. So I don't think any nation worth its salt will allow a high-ranking general be assassinated in its capital, and that's his location was about 7 kilometers from the Kremlin without any appropriate response. So I believe there will be consequences enough to deter future encores. So, hypothetically, if it were a United States general assassinated in Washington by an adversarial entity, I believe the United States will ensure that such entity suffers great consequences. Okay, we look at this concept of deterrence that one is discouraged from taking or implementing a course of action because the consequences would be overly enormous compared to whatever strategic benefits are intended. So that this might actually be pointing to a blank check for Russia to hold Ukraine accountable and establish a deterrence to forestall a future recurrence. So Russia might want to go to any extent to actually send a message, send a signal to Ukraine and to the West generally that such attitude will no longer be tolerated, and they might want to retaliate in such a manner that we will actually serve as a deterrent so that it doesn't reoccur. So we talk of military command and control targets in terms of how close one is to the battlefield. So Kirillov evidently was not involved in combat operations, as it were. So he was more involved in exposing the activities of the United States in microbiological labs in Ukraine and elsewhere generally. So he was indicted by Ukraine and assassinated the following day by Ukraine. So talk about the speed of the Ukrainian justice, and so it remains to be seen how fast Russian retribution will be Okay. So that Russia has a lot on its plate as regards Ukraine, as regards the Ukrainian conflict is a no-brainer. So seeing the Ukraine debacle as existential, and the extent to which the concentration of the Russian military resources in Ukraine accounted for the quick fall of the Assad regime in Syria is actually a valid debate. But I must admit that I was surprised by the lightning speed at which the HTS swept through from Aleppo to Damascus with little or no resistance. Yes, because one cannot just but wonder, with that the lightning speed with which the Syrian regime folded like a pack of cards. I mean, this is the same Syria that resisted a concerted attack by the West and its militant proxies for 4 years until Russia entered the conflict in 2015. But just folded in 10 days under the assault of HTS. Despite having eight years since 2016. Since the 2016 end of the siege on Aleppo to rebuild, regroup, and strengthen their defense capabilities, and despite knowing that Mohammed al-Julani, the HTS leader, had plans to take Aleppo and go all the way to Damascus. It's something that is really puzzling to me, and I think there is more to it than meets the eye. Okay, and by the way, al-Julani, it's ex-Al-Qaeda, ISIS, and is now being portrayed by Western media as a moderate, even though he's on the terrorist watch list and he has a bounty on his head by the U.S. State Department. Okay, and he has even toned down his looks, with the trimming of his beard and the swap of his caliphate dressing, for Zelensky-styled military-themed couture, so you have that rebranding, recalibration, and which is being propped up and being aided, projected by the Western media, right? And the Arab League itself, maybe with the exception of Qatar, are in support of Bashar al-Assad. So I'm really surprised that the regime folded in 10 days, like one with no military spine, military support at all. So could this be part of a larger plan? Could this be some sort of entrapment? All right. Recall how the Soviet Union went into Afghanistan and eventually got his fingers burnt, leading to its ultimate balkanization. So the Syrian regime was well aware of the threat posed by HTS, since HTS has been attacking Syrian government positions since 2022. So the elements of surprise on the side of the Syrian regime was lacking. So and you have the Syrian army folding in a dominion fashion, place after place in a coordinated manner. You have orders from generals to vacate positions with little or no fighting, little or no resistance, pulling back at the demobilizations, melting away into thin air. Even in a place like Ahmad, where the Syrian regime had its best unit, and engaging in urban warfare is something that normally will take some time, even months, and even the Syrian army outnumbered the HTS by about 10-1. All right, so even if there was resistance in Ahmad, in the urban warfare, 10 days will not be enough to be able to, conquer the regime. So I believe that the melting away of the Syrian regime was deliberate, that it might be part of a larger plan, but it remains to be seen, because it is inconceivable that they just capitulated in 10 days. So I think it was deliberate, and the justification might be to just entrap the opposition in Syria. And also instructive to note that the various militant groups are in conflict with one another. The US backs the Kurds, Turkey is fighting the Kurds in Syria so that they don't influence the Kurds who are in rebellion in Turkey, so they don't influence the Kurds who are localized in Turkey. And even within the HTS, the moderates and the hardliners are in conflict. So we'll be having another Libya situation unfolding right before us. And Israel has since been bombing the crossing between the Hezbollah in Lebanon and in Syria. So the day the truce with Hezbollah came into effect, which was the same day HTS launched its attack. Okay, so I really think letting the HTS in was deliberate, intentional. I mean, letting them in, allowing them to splinter, and then countering them maybe through attrition. Might just be part of the larger plan. So that remains to be seen. So of course, Iran loses its supply route through Syria to Hezbollah. So even Hezbollah's objectives might be modified. Hezbollah will need to modify its objectives because of that supply route that has now been upended with Israel coming into the fray. Okay, so Hezbollah might just be wanting to survive for long periods without supplies. Okay, so the objectives for Hezbollah might now just be survival because supplies will now be impeded with Israel coming into the fray. Right. So it's now been suggested that the IDF, the Israeli Defense Force, has seized land 3 times the size of Gaza, okay, in Syria now, and the IDF has engaged in the destruction of Syrian military assets, citing the need to avoid the militants, the rebels, the terrorists getting their hands on the military hardware. So with all the confusion now in Syria and the balkanization of some sort, Syria is ceasing little by little to be a geopolitical entity. Because the conflicting forces are dividing up the country. You have Turkish-backed jihadist forces, you have American-backed Kurdish forces, you have Russians on the Syrian coast, and Israel too has invaded. About 4 days ago, and according to reports, it's about Israel is about 15 to 20 kilometers from Damascus now. So, of course, this is illegal and against international law. Right. So, yes, Israel should have security, no doubt. But the concept of greater Israel, of expanding territory, might run contrary to international norms, and with great consequences, as it were. Okay, so the 4th June 1967 borders of Israel are the internationally recognized borders. Recall the United Nations Security Council Resolution 242. The occupied lands are not part of Israel. Okay, but now Israel, the plan for the greater Israel, of course, involves expanding through to Palestine, Lebanon, and Syria. Okay, and this is an invasion that's supported by Israeli hardliners. All right. So, and having the United States foreign policy dictated by the Israeli lobby also amplifies these positions. And I want to mention the saber rattling by Mitch McConnell, Senator Mitch McConnell, the outgoing Republican majority leader of the Senate, to be replaced by John Thune, of course, as regards the assertion of United States primacy, which I'll just term as United States hegemony, which could be interpreted maybe in Russia as U.S. putting military assets in Ukraine, in the South Caucasus, in Georgia, and do whatever they want. All right, but that's an issue that's of core national security for Russia. I mean, to reject such a world. They don't expect Russia to sit idly by and U.S. Advancing its primacy, okay, which of course translates into materializing Ukraine and Georgia, the South Caucasus, and all that. So that of course will bring about conflict with Russia, all right, whether directly or through proxies. And in East Asia, it might mean surrounding China with its military, in Japan, in Korea, Australia, and New Zealand, and of course the East China Sea and the South China Sea. I mean, deploying intermediate range weapons, which of course is against China's national security interests. Okay, so of course you don't expect China too, as a nuclear power, to just sit idly by and allow US deploy assets all around it. name of United States primacy. Of course, the potential conflict of interest in Taiwan, because China sees Taiwan as part of China, or part of mainland China. But you understand the key position that Taiwan occupies in terms of the production of semiconductors. Largest supplier of semiconductors in the world, and the United States and of course the developed world depend a lot from semiconductors from Taiwan. So that's a strategic interest which conflicts. Bringing about the conflicts, potential conflict point for China and the United States. So when and if Russia and China are on knife edge, yes, and they feel that their national security interest here has been threatened, how does that impact the safety of the United States? If Russia and China feel threatened, if they're on the knife edge, and they feel that their national security, is at risk, how does that improve the safety of the United States? I mean, the risk of nuclear annihilation or catastrophe is increased when these powers are at one another's throats, when these powers are in conflict, these superpowers that have nuclear capabilities. So, and the foreign policy promoted by the neocons as the war hawks, as exemplified by Mitch McConnell's statement talking about the United States primacy. We only put the world on the brink of a nuclear exchange, and according to the words of Ronald Reagan, I mean, nobody wins when you talk about a nuclear Armageddon. It's nobody's comfort zone. And with the incoming Trump administration, I'm seeing an enabler, for the plans for a greater Israel, because Trump is much more disposed to Israel, even more than President Biden, and with his ambassador pick to Israel, that's Mike Huckabee, former Arkansas governor, who is a staunch Israel supporter. All right, so I think Israel will be more indulged to pursue the ambitions of a greater Israel. So if the United States foreign policy is not extricated from the Israeli lobby, so it remains to be seen how the Trump administration will be able to bring the world to peace and calm, if it's also at the forefront of advancing the objectives, the ambition of the greater Israel. So it's going to be an interesting. It's going to be interesting times, but challenging times if these times are not well managed. But like I always say, whoever is the occupier of the Oval Office of the White House is the biggest influencer of world peace. All right, with the defense budget of over $800 billion, with over 800 foreign military bases around the world, with myriads of intelligence assets. I mean, whoever occupies the Oval Office of the White House is the most equipped singular person, to determine the direction of world peace, the extent of world peace, but actively, reactively, and proactively, covertly and overtly. So just we hope that Mr. Trump's policy will bring about a more peaceful world. So with that, we come to the end of today's episode. Please do remember that at Armorgate, we are always ready to help and support your organizations to work optimally, creating frameworks and processes for optimization of resources and attainment of goals. You can contact us on Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram at Armorgate. You can also visit our website at www.thearmorgate.org. Our email is contact@thearmorgate.org. I hope the time we spent together has been impactful. And I assure you that at my own end, it has been a pleasure hosting you. And until I come up again on your devices, it's bye for now. Thank you for your time, and God bless you.